Washington pulled off a big win over USC. We got so much to get into.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back in to another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. And today, once again, we've got our guy, Jake Butt, former Michigan tight end. He was on the call of the game yesterday. Did an absolutely fantastic job. Jake, shout out to you for that. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We got so much stuff to get into from Washington's 26-21 win over USC. Jedd Fisch's program, it's starting to build. The building blocks are there for a very solid program moving forward. We're going to discuss Washington's quarterback situation now that we've seen it for 2 months. Jake got a chance to get a look at that in person, but Jake, we got to start with, I love just putting Jake's takes on here. Your biggest takeaway from this game, getting a chance to be back out at Husky Stadium. Weather wasn't the same as the first time you were here, but it's wonderful to have you here. Thanks for joining us, and it's wonderful to have you in Seattle again.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure to be out there, Roman. Great to see you. Lars, man, sorry I missed you. Roman can attest. I was like, where's Lars at? I wanted to get the chance to see you in person. So, but good to be on here with you guys. The fans are awesome. The stadium is awesome. This felt like the full experience with the weather too. We asked Jedd about that, and he's like, "Oh, I'm excited for the weather. This is part of the brand." And he wanted to see if USC how they would deal with the rain. So, love my time up there. My big takeaway though is this. I continue to say it. You can't. Coaching is not just about results in a bubble, okay, like in a vacuum. It's not the best coach isn't the team that wins the most games. And the best staff is the team that wins the most games. Washington's staff is loaded. I continue to be blown away by this staff. The game plan by Steve Belichick, in the discipline, even that last drive. I'm sure you guys are feeling, Husky fans, we're getting nervous as USC's marching the ball down the field. To me, I'm looking at this as Steve Belichick's. That is absolute discipline, knowing let's give them the underneath stuff. They had no timeouts. Let's let the clock roll. And then also knowing the closer you get to the end zone, the harder it is to score. Just from an X's and O's standpoint, you could take 6 guys and put them 1 yard deep in the end zone. And because of the positioning on the field, 1 yard deep in the end zone, you could defend everything behind you and everything in front of you. So it gets harder to score the closer you get to the end zone. It takes discipline. You cannot have an ego. Belichick has no ego. I think he'd be happy giving up 500 yards in a game as long as he didn't allow points and the team won. I thought Jedd had a great game plan and they were in full control of that game in the first half. And then USC had their momentum, and yet he still didn't rush, never pressed, right? He didn't go beyond himself. He stuck to the game plan, and really that's ultimately how they won the game. Just a beautiful, beautiful game all the way through. And I know the Husky fans are got to be happy about that one. That was a big game in the season for both teams, and Washington came out on top.
And Jake, the last time you were up here, I believe was the Michigan game. If you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one or
Yes.
not. So that was the last UW win as well. From that win to last night or on Saturday night, was there anything glaring that was like, okay, hey, you know what? Jedd made an improvement where it didn't necessarily look great. And I'm not comparing Michigan to USC, but again, 2 marquee programs, 2 big time wins, both at home to get you up into that 6-win category. Did you see anything different in that regard, or was it kind of the same program, maybe just a slightly improved overall?
Yeah, no, I just want to fans should never waver from their standard. It's great you should expect to win every single time you take the field. It should be true for staff and players too. If you don't believe that, then you shouldn't be in this business, right? Like, you should expect to win, but the context matters of this is an inexperienced Washington team. We knew that going into the season. The offensive line was gutted this offseason, seriously gutted. I was talking to some of the staff pregame, like, had some of those guys that transferred out stayed. I mean, Washington, we could be looking at Washington as, one of the competitors in the top of the conference, but the O-line had been gutted. So my big takeaway, the big progress is natural progression, which is to be expected. The team plays better at home. That's to be expected, again, especially when you consider the inexperience, particularly for the offensive line and in the trenches. So it's a confirmation of what I believe to be true, is that with this staff, the team's going to continue to get better and better and better every week. They're not winning the Big Ten this year, but that's not really the goal, again, considering how much they lost. The goal is to get better and better and better. And what you're really doing, what this year is about, year one of the Jedd Fisch era, you have your plot of land. That's Washington. Right now, you're digging down into the earth and pouring concrete. You're building a solid foundation for the next 2 or 3 years. And man, there's some exciting young pieces on this team. Clearly, Damon Williams. We saw Decker DeGraff, Kamori House. How about that guy having a huge game as a true freshman? We saw Adam Mohammad, I believe, get in there as well. Of course, Denzel Boston's going to be back. Like there's a bunch of young pieces that you're saying, whoa, there is some reason to be excited about the future here.
So let's get into one of those guys where Jake, peek behind the curtain for all the everydayers. Shout out to John Wilner, who, he tweeted out that you did a fantastic job preparing for the game and used the phrase locked on. So shout out to him for that, even though, he didn't necessarily know all the context there. You and I, we had a call on Friday where we chatted about this prep for the game. And one of the guys I told you to watch out for in that same vein of a younger guy who was looking to step up was Lance Holtzclaw. And he made a fantastic play on that 4th down to wrap up Miller Moss and seal the game. What have you seen from not just Lance, but this pass rush as a whole? Because it feels like that's one of the areas that has really grown throughout the season.
Yeah, this it's not an elite pass rush. Like you guys, you don't have a Braylon Trice from last year, right? Like
Sure.
You don't have someone that can affect the game, change the game, take over the game. And yet again, like it's not about that. Can you get pressure when the team needs it? And I was curious on that last drive. I knew Belichick has the ability and willingness to send pressure, particularly in the red zone, right? He has these pressure packages. He didn't really pressure that much last night, though. Like he felt very comfortable sitting in coverage and giving up underneath passes, rallying and tackling. And then as USC got closer to the red zone, I was curious, is Belichick going to send pressure, something to disrupt his rhythm? And then, like you said, Holtzclaw and then Isaiah Ward too, guys that kind of showed up. I think Ward got there on 3rd down, or at least had shown up on that drive a few times. So that's all you can ask for, right? Is in a clear, known pass rush situation, you're going to have a number of opportunities. Can you get there? And in the biggest moment of the game, he got there.
Absolutely.
Tight end's best friend, worst nightmare, has got to be one of the best linebackers in the country, at least on that day yesterday. Carson, just have you seen a performance from a true one? Because there's a difference between Alfonso Chibutala and Carson Bruner in terms of how they are as linebackers. Carson kind of more prototypical, old-fashioned. Alfonso, the new age, can do it all. Just what was your impression of Carson yesterday?
I don't know him personally, and you guys probably know him better, and you've probably listened to his teammates talk about him, but I just got to imagine a guy like Carson is one of those guys that everyone loves on the team. Like I just got to imagine if you say, hey, who's the hardest worker on the team? And they're probably Carson Bruner's a name that probably gets tossed around. Who do you trust the most on the team? It's probably Carson Bruner, right? Like in the biggest moments there he was. And he did it. One of the more underrated parts of his game is the coverage aspect. I think PFF going into the season, both him and Zoe, they had like one of the higher coverage grades of any linebacking unit in college football. Like these guys are pretty stout in coverage. And not only, it wasn't just the 2 interceptions, but he was in on some PBUs as well. That interception when USC was running the dig route behind him, that's just a veteran that understands his opponent. USC loves crossers and in-breaking routes. For whatever reason, that's just something they love to do. So Carson's dropping into his zone, and I believe he felt those routes and goes up and catches it with his hands. Like those are not a lot of linebackers catch outside of the frame of their body, and he did. Then he's in there on pressure as well. The 4th down, they had the goal line stand. I believe on 3rd down, they ran a toss play into the boundary. Woody Marks was getting hit but falling forward. Bruner, I don't think he got credited with the tackle, but his shoulder was there, and he like helped stop the momentum of the running back to give them a 4th down chance when Kamari House actually made the play. So he was a little bit everywhere, even on special teams. Denzel Boston had a huge hit, but Carson Bruner was right there as well. So that's what you want out of a senior leader like that, an experienced guy, a guy that is kind of the anti-modern college football player. Rather than transfer and look for the easy route and seek money, he wanted to stay home. I got to imagine Husky fans freaking love Carson Bruner. How could you not, man? That guy is giving his all for the program.
Absolutely. Jake, speaking of senior leaders, let's jump into this quarterback situation. Right after message from our good friends over at 5 Hour Energy, because our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like us, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. You know what else gave me a bit of Husky fan fuel this week? That 4th down stop from Lance Holtzclaw. He did a fantastic job getting to Miller Moss and forcing a bad throw. Love seeing him succeed as a guy who just has worked so hard to get to that point. It's awesome to see that. 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy, available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. So, Jake, I don't think there's been any bigger point of, I don't want to say contention, but just discussion within just Husky Nation this season than the Will Rogers, Damon Williams usage, where there are some people who say, hey, you got to ride the season out with Will. There are some people who say, hey, give the reins over to Damon right now. And there are some people who say, all right, like the way it is, it's totally fine. And just the first impression of what you saw last night from the way that the quarterback usage was split up between those two guys. We saw an interesting package where Damon actually made his first career catch out of the backfield, which was super cool to see. What did you think of just the way that Jedd split up the duties between those two guys?
Look, I'll just say this, like Jedd, just look at his history and look at where he's been. Jedd's earned the right to, and I don't want to speak for Husky fans, but this is just my opinion. Jedd's earned the right to be trusted by his team and by his staff. That guy's been around some great leaders, won a ton of games. You look at what he did at Arizona. That doesn't happen. Many have tried and many have fallen to find any type of success there. I trust Jedd. Very smart guy. He knows what he's doing. So there's a few ways to look at it, and let's look at their schedule. Now, are you going? If you want to start Damon, there's probably a group of Husky fans that's saying, "Hey, we're not winning the conference this year. Let's start Damon." They're going to Penn State next week, whiteout. I've played there. That's not the place. All right, that's not the place. You can do more harm than good, but you can also sprinkle in and give him opportunities to change the game in a controlled setting. That's basically it's like depositing money in the bank that you can draw on later, which is what Jedd's effectively doing right now. There's also a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So let me just give Will Rogers some props here. I think Husky fans should know this. Will comes in, and Will has established himself as a leader. It's been one of the benefits of this program with all the turnover, the staff turnover, the roster turnover. Will has established himself as a leader, obviously played a ton of football. He's leaned into Jedd Fisch's plan and leaned into this team and this program. And what we were told this week is that Jedd meets with the quarterbacks, each as individuals. And he said Will Rogers, unprovoked, told Jedd, he said, hey, listen, like in these next few weeks, I'm the leader, but Damon has to take over this leadership role. He's like, I need to move to the side a little bit. And we meaning Will and Jedd and the staff have to let Damon start to lead, give him some of those opportunities. Think about the awareness of a guy in Will Rogers who, probably get some shots at the NFL, but who knows, right? Like this could very well be the last few quarters of his playing football career, and he's thinking about the next guy to a program that he didn't commit to out of college. Like, think about the loyalty and the maturity and the leadership right there. So to me, the perspective I get from talking to the staff, watching the film, and just observing things is the way the quarterback situation has been handled. I think it's been handled really, really well, and I'd be very encouraged with that story in mind for the future of that position.
That's intriguing because the way that Will started his career out is almost the same way at Mississippi State, with KJ Costello as a grad transfer and Will Rogers as a true freshman who Mike Leach was the first quarterback he signed. The thing that intrigues me about what you said was sprinkle it in. Like, do you sense that, kind of similar to what I asked you in the first segment, where is DeMond? Because I asked Jedd the same sort of thing, and Jedd's like, well, we want him to also be able to pass and not just run. He gets his first rushing touchdown after his first passing touchdown. Where have you seen when DeMond has come in? Because it's kind of been actually less and less over the past few games. Where have you seen maybe his impact be the most felt on this offense?
I don't think we've seen it yet. I think, Will has a very high floor, but probably a lower ceiling in terms of just raw talent. There was a play, I want to say at the end of the third quarter, where Washington ran a big play action max protect, and Denzel Boston he was breaking out to the corner towards the front pylon, and Will decided not to throw it. I think DeMond Williams would step up in and rip that. It was a big throw, tough throw, but I think that's what you're going to see in the future is, and I watched him practice, the ball just jumps out of DeMond's hands. He's got just pure raw talent. And Jedd is very, very excited about the future with DeMond Williams. So I don't think we've seen it. I don't even think I've seen enough to say, based on what I expect to happen, we haven't seen enough. They talk about him like he's the fastest guy on the team, like not one of the fastest or a very fast quarterback, like one of the fastest players on the team, maybe the fastest player on the team. So that speaks a lot. I also think, what can happen is, I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. Like, success can mess you up. Okay. So say you put DeMond in and say he has a lot of success early. The fans and the average eye would say, this is great. DeMond looks great. But if he's having success without having the fundamentals or the mental process, or if he's had, like, that can lie to you and hurt you. So by sprinkling things in, Jedd's got a package of plays in which DeMond knows the full process. Like, he knows these 10 to 15 plays in and out. So he can practice the operation of an elite quarterback for those specific plays. So he's not getting ahead of himself. Say you come in and you just go out there and you're just playing football, running around like that. That can lie to you. So you want a quarterback that's working mentally first and understanding the process, understanding the shifts, the motions, how to call a play. What is the defense presenting? What are my reads? What's the situation? If it's 3rd and 1, if it's the 2-minute situation, where's the play clock? You want, before talent comes into play, DeMond's got a ton of talent. Having him, sit the way he has and come in periodically this year, he gets to work all those other things, which is going to benefit him and allow him to maximize his talent in the future.
So when you talk about maximizing his talent, one thing that Lars and I have discussed all season long is just the way that Jedd wants to run this offense. It feels like it's way more suited to what DeMond's skill set is compared to what Will's skill set is. And I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons that some fans have been clamoring for him to start, where I think you make a great point, especially going into Penn State in that regard. But especially with your experience playing in Jedd's offense, why is it so successful with somebody like DeMond, who has that dual threat ability at the helm?
Yeah, because Jedd is he's a brilliant football mind, in my opinion. He's a really smart football coach. And it's like Andy Reid. Let's just use Andy Reid. I'm not calling, DeMond Patrick Mahomes here, but okay, so Andy Reid and the Chiefs had a lot of success with Alex Smith, and Alex Smith is a damn good quarterback, but he's limited. So what Andy can call, he can try to call plays, but Alex Smith isn't going to be able to roll to his left plant off one foot and rip a 60-yard throw across his body to the right. That's something Andy can scheme up and dream up, but he can't call. That's the same thing with Jedd, where there's a deep bag he wants to get to that I just don't think he can simply call with Will, or call and feel fully confident with Will in their quarterback. You can call a lot of it, but not all of it. With Damon, all of a sudden, whatever Jedd dreams up when in his film session and in those meetings with his staff, Damon's going to be able to execute, including, of course, running the football. So I think that's the exciting piece of this.
I'm so glad you say that, because I feel like we saw a couple of those plays yesterday too, where they had Will rolling out to his right or rolling out to his left. And the one that really stood out to me, I believe it was on 2nd and 18 after the holding call, when he tried to step up and throw on the run and missed short of Denzel Boston.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a perfect explanation of where the differences are. And it's not a knock on Will. It's just the skill sets are so different that it's not all the way there. So I think that's a really great point. But Jake, we talk about Damon. You mentioned some of these other guys earlier. Let's get into some of these other young players on this roster, because Jedd Fisch is really building a promising program. Right after message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And just the guy that I keep going back to, because he's just had such a spectacular season, is Jayden Daniels. He looked so good against the Giants on Sunday. And that's a guy who you got to go check out his Rookie of the Year odds over on FanDuel, because they're only going to get lower, and you got to jump on those while you can. Lars, what you got for Jake?
So one thing that you mentioned also, kind of to feed into that, was I wanted to get your impression of Damon as a pocket passer. Kind of just continue on in that segment. And in that same vein, you mentioned also Adam Mohammad. I don't know. I'm sure, again, 1,000 plays last night, so I'm not sure if it pops right to your head. But he had a play where there was a USC, I want to say probably like an outside linebacker, maybe a safety blitzer. It wasn't a big guy, but it was again, we're talking about, an 18-year-old versus at least a 19 or 20-year-old there in the situation. Adam locks him up and throws him down. Mm-hmm. We're going back to pass pro for running backs. Like, that side of the equation, how much does that help that Damon is able to work with all of these pieces? And it's not just, hey, you're giving Cam and Cam Davis and Jonah Coleman, one of them is going to be gone after this season. How much does that help the dichotomy building everything forward?
Wait, could you say this again? So who hit it was Adam Mohammad that hit the running? Okay.
Yeah, the running back that basically like the younger son of Jonah Coleman that looks like Jonah, will be like Jonah. Yep. Your kind of impression of the younger team building for the future together right now.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. That's everything. And I mean, the thing about it is, like, these guys seem very mature. Like, the type of person that Jedd's bringing in I think is encouraging. I don't. There seems to be no like immaturity on the team. And I also think a big piece of that is like his staff, and just the feeling I get being around the program is that it's a professional program. Like, that's why you have Pete Carroll and Belichick walking around. Like, these are just, I think the guys understand that they see the future in a sense where it's like, hey, like, oh, okay, if I listen to Jedd and my coaches, I can play in the NFL and, make a living by playing football. What an opportunity. So that leads to guys like Mohammad and Damon starting to mature a bit quicker. So we did a little bit of a segment too, where Jonah was able to be mentored by guys before him at Arizona. And all of a sudden you have Jonah. He's a 4.0 student on the dean's list, high IQ. They said he knows the offense as well as the quarterbacks. Like, he's making the checks alongside the quarterbacks. That's how locked in he is.
Oh, wow.
So then what do you have is Adam Mohammad is looking at the success of Jonah. And clearly Adam's got the raw talent too. I mean, he's built like a college player already, and clearly has the strength, like you said, but he gets to just observe how it's done in front of him. And that's, you cannot overstate how important that is. That's why Alabama was so successful for so long. Like, what culture is where everything's going in one direction, and if someone wants to go in the other direction, you're standing out you're sticking out like a sore thumb, to the point where, okay, get out of here. Like, Jonah is a professional, right? Will Rogers has played a ton of football. Jedd Fisch has won a lot of games. Everything's going in this direction. Guys, these younger guys just fall in line because they see what happens from an individual and a team standpoint when it's done right. So that to me is kind of the key here, is really the culture that Jedd's building early in his career here with the Huskies.
So, Jake, one thing I'm really curious about, because we talked about some of the other younger guys that are really making an impact on this program. Is there any one guy that during the game that maybe you prepped on him a little bit when you talked to Jedd or anything like that, that really just kind of jumped off the screen to you? Because I know for me, it was Keith Reynolds, where he's a guy who Lars and I really liked watching him practice in the spring and in the fall. Seeing him score his first career touchdown was awesome. But I'm really curious if there's any guy like that really jumped out to you.
Yeah, Keith, I mean, it was good to see Keith score too. And he's one of the fast guys on the team. I think he's going to fill that Giles Jackson role in the future. Just another exciting piece to add to the fact of Jedd Fisch. Whatever he can dream up, he's got the guys that can go execute it. I don't think Denzel Boston is a guy that's going to blow the top off the defense, but I think Keith is a guy that could potentially do that going forward in his career. So that dynamic's exciting. I like Latu. I like your tight ends, man. Latu's been a really key, underrated piece. I mean, he's going to get a chance to go to the NFL now too. That's a big freaking dude with trusty hands that has made some key plays. And then, of course, DeGraff, like, how about that? Just rolling and rumbling down the sideline. It's an explosive tight end, man. And he's a great route runner. He understands. He's reminds me a lot of Colston Loveland at Michigan in terms of the guy understands leverage, how to separate, how to use his body. He's going to be. I think he's going to be a guy that's catching 40 plus passes, next year and going forward in his career. He's got a chance to compete for all conference and all American honors just off a pure talent standpoint.
How much do you think the tight ends, the offense has been limited by not having so many tight ends? Because you mentioned Charlie Kroll out for the year with the ACL, Ryan Otten, Cade's younger brother, out for the year. Quentin Moore was thought to be a 1 to 2 week injury early in the season and ends up basically missing the entire season. So he might run it back next year. Yeah. How do you feel the offense has kind of been impacted by the lack of time? How is a Jedd Fisch offense impacted generally by the lack of tight end depth? Let me just kind of put it in a general sense.
I don't think it's hurt them that much because, I mean, though they only have 2 tight ends, like those tight ends have played well and they're in shape and trustworthy. Like, now if you lost one of those guys, that then it could get really interesting, but they're pretty much down to 2, right? Latu and DeGraff. And I mean, those guys are playing well. It's more so the offensive line, I think, is the big limiting factor for everything, where as a party is the only starting offensive lineman that was there in spring. Like, it's been a piecemeal offensive line besides that. And they're even rotating guys. Like, they have guys that are healthy, but that aren't in shape to play 70 plays. So they're having to rotate at the left tackle spot, rotate at the guard spots and change guys around. That's challenging for offensive lines. Chemistry matters up there. Communication matters. And they just have no choice but to challenge. So if there's any limiting factor, it's been the offensive line.
So let's dive into the offensive line a little bit before we wrap up here, because there was one guy that really stood out to me. He was there in the spring and did make his first career start yesterday, and that was Kahlee Tafai, who started at left tackle. I was really, really impressed with him. I think he ended up playing 50 some odd snaps, where Soana Fasolo still got in there a little bit, but Kahlee Tafai against the USC pass rush that I know they had a couple of injuries, not necessarily one of the more dynamic ones in the Big Ten, but he really stood out to me yesterday.
Yeah, well, it's more so against Danton Lynn, like being aware of the pressure packages. Yeah. Like he does some exotic looks and he does some fun things on third down. So for redshirt freshman to come in there and also, again, rotating, like you have to be mentally locked in first. Like you have to be very aware of your assignment. You have to be aware of what the guys around you, who they're blocking, to make sure you're getting the right person. So, man, he's kind of established himself. I think he might be the starter here going forward. They probably will still rotate just because of, from a conditioning standpoint and wanting to get other guys reps. But he's really seized that starting left tackle position, in my opinion.
Yes, I just want to, again, shout out one more time, Max. I think when healthy is the best left tackle UW has at this moment in time, just because he's more veteran, all that sort of stuff.
He didn't play, so he wasn't on the injury, right? Like, I don't know what the deal is. I know we were talking about that, so I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, it seemed like they worked him out in pregame warmups, and then they were just kind of like, oh, let's give it one more week. That felt like it might have been the case, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay. So when he gets back, you guys think he'll be the starter then, huh?
Yeah. It feels like, though, to your point, it feels like the rotation will now be Max and then Kahlee Tafai mixed in a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, Tafai, he's made the most of his opportunities for sure. Like he's certainly made that. I think they feel good with Tafai in there, right now.
What's the one thing you want to see from Washington to close out the season in terms of maybe either a player that you want to see pop? I'm not asking for a record 3-1 sort of thing, but just what would be the best for Washington to springboard into this December portal period that Jedd's going to have to go rebuild one more time, not as much as last year, but he clearly said he's going to go into the portal. What would be one thing that you would say, like, hey, this is what Washington needs to do or should do to springboard in the next year?
What are the play on the road? I want to see them, carry this over and play on the road, especially next week, where that's one of the tough environments in college football. I played a few night games, whiteouts. It's going to be really tough. It is going to test your team. It's going to test that staff. That's a long flight too. I mean, the one thing I want to see is I want to see them go play a competitive 4-quarter football game. They've been able to do it at home, but like we've seen them, on the road versus Iowa or Rutgers or wherever, just haven't been able to put together and finish drives and finish 4 quarters of football. Indiana as well. Like they've had chances, but for whatever reason, haven't been able to finish. So next week will be the ultimate test. Would love to see them, finish and play 4 quarters of good football.
Jake, any closing thoughts?
I think it's just to talk about next week, that Washington can beat anyone. Like this team is talented enough where, they won't be favored next week, but they can beat anyone. So I just want to see them give themselves a chance. I want to see guys continue to improve and step up. So I love Jedd. Really, really easy guy to root for. I love the staff that he's putting together up there. And that fan base, you guys care. I just keep trying to sing it here in the Midwest to people. Like people need to go and read the history of Washington and how successful the program's been, the great players that have came through there. So everyone's got their opinions on conference realignment. I think one of the great things is Washington and the brand and the history gets exposed to a whole different set of people. So that's one of the good positive things about it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more there. Jake, you did an absolutely tremendous job in the broadcast last night. We always appreciate when you make some time for us. It really does mean so much to us. Thank you so much for being here. Lars, as always, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you. And thank you so much for making Locked On Huskies your first listen today. Now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Our guy, Craig Sheeman, puts the Big Ten first. When everyone else overlooks it, you can find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever else you listen to your podcast. And if you want to check out more that we have to offer, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.